All right, so get ready, because today we are going deep, deep into the story of Sean Diddy Combs.
Diddy.
Yeah, Diddy. And we're going to be using this new Peacock documentary, Shadows of an Empire, to kind of guide us along.
Okay.
And, it's interesting because this is not just a recap of, like all of his greatest hits and stuff.
Right.
This documentary kind of takes a hard look at the man behind the music and asks some really tough questions about the price of his success.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It doesn't shy away from kind of alleging that there is a darker side to Diddy's empire.
Right.
And it kind of paints this picture of a businessman who really prioritized his own ambition, potentially at the expense of the artists that he was working with.
Yeah, and they don't just like make vague claims.
Yeah.
Like they really bring receipts, like archival footage, interviews with like former associates, like people who were there in the early days of Bad Boy Records.
Yeah.
It really gets you thinking, like, how much do we really know about, the inner workings of the music industry and the deals that get made behind closed doors?
Absolutely. And one of the most compelling arguments that the documentary makes is that he utilized some very specific contract clauses that were detrimental to the artists that signed them.
Oh, wow.
So they're alleging that he used these clauses to gain control over master recordings and limit their future earnings.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's a pretty serious accusation.
Absolutely.
And something that I think a lot of us, like, we don't fully grasp.
Yeah.
Like, what exactly are these clauses and how could they actually impact an artist's career in the long run?
Well, think about it this way. When an artist signs a record deal, they're essentially handing over the rights to their music to the label.
Right.
And the master recording is that original recording of a song.
Okay.
And owning that master recording means that you control how that song is used and who profits from it.
Got it.
So in many of these cases, these contracts gave him ownership of those master recordings.
Wow.
Intentionally leaving the artist with very little control over their own work.
So even if a song like blows up and becomes a huge hit, the artist might not see a lot of that financial success if they don't own their masters.
Right. They might get an advance up front and some royalties.
Okay.
But the lion's share of the profits would go to the label.
Right.
And in this case, to Diddy himself.
Interesting.
It's a dynamic that has been debated for years.
Right.
And this documentary kind of brings it back into the spotlight.
Now, Diddy has publicly responded to these allegations.
Right, he has.
Calling them baseless accusations and essentially denying any wrongdoing.
Right.
So how has that response been received, and where does the public stand on all of this?
It's been really interesting to see how it's played out in the court of public opinion. You have some people that are staunchly defending Diddy, pointing to his undeniable impact on the music industry, the careers that he helped launch, the cultural influence that he holds. But on the other hand, you have those that are deeply troubled by these allegations, questioning whether the ends justify the means. And if his success came at the expense of others?
It's a complex situation for sure.
It is.
I mean, we're talking about someone who is revered as a cultural icon.
Right.
But then these allegations suggest a different side to the story, a side that's really difficult to ignore. And what I find particularly intriguing is how Diddy is navigating this controversy publicly. He's continuing to make appearances. He's continuing to release music. He's even addressing these allegations kind of indirectly. It almost feels like a carefully crafted performance.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like he's saying, I'm still here. I'm still Diddy. And I'm not going to let these allegations define me. It's a display of resilience. But it also raises these questions about accountability and whether he's truly reckoning with the concerns that are being raised.
So we have this documentary making these explosive claims. We have Diddy firing back with denials. And the public is kind of caught in the middle trying to make sense of it all. What do you think is the bigger picture here? What does this whole situation say about the music industry as a whole?
Well, I think it underscores a fundamental truth about the entertainment industry. It's a business. And like any business, there's always a tension between creativity and ambition. And the bottom line, this documentary really shines a light on the power dynamics that are at play. And how those dynamics can sometimes lead to exploitation, even if it's not always intentional.
It makes you wonder how many other stories like this are out there.
Yeah.
How many artists have been caught in similar situations?
Right.
It's a sobering thought. And it certainly makes me want to dig deeper into the business side of the music industry.
And that's one of the things this documentary does so well.
Yeah.
It forces us to look beyond the glitz and the glamour.
Right.
To examine the structures that underpin the music that we love.
Mm-hmm.
And to ask ourselves some tough questions about the cost of creating art.
Right.
In a system that often prioritizes profit over people.
Yeah.
You know?
For sure.
And it's
definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Okay, so moving on to some other thoughts about this documentary.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting how the documentary doesn't just present Diddy as like this one-dimensional villain.
Right.
It really shows like his undeniable talent, his charisma, his drive to succeed. Mm-hmm. It acknowledges the opportunities that he created for others.
Right.
His influence on, music and culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then it juxtaposes that with these allegations, these stories from artists who felt taken advantage of. Mm-hmm. And it creates this really complex and conflicting image.
I think that's one of the most thought-provoking aspects of the documentary, is that it doesn't offer like a simple answer.
Right.
Or try to neatly categorize him as good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
It really recognizes the duality of his actions, the good and the potentially exploitative, and really leaves the audience to kind of grapple with the nuances.
One thing that really struck me was how they use that archival footage to illustrate those contrasting narratives.
Mm-hmm.
You see Diddy in his prime, at the height of his success, exuding confidence and swagger.
Yep.
And then you hear these kind of heartbreaking accounts from artists who felt like they were left behind, financially and emotionally drained.
That contrast is so powerful.
Yeah.
It's the stark reminder that success often comes at a cost.
Mm.
And sometimes that cost is borne by those that are most vulnerable.
Right.
And it raises all these questions about who benefits from the current system and whether those who contribute their talent and creativity are fairly compensated.
We often hear these stories about artists who sign bad deals early in their careers.
Yes.
Maybe because they're so eager for their break, for their shot at fame.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is a widespread issue in the music industry?
Yeah.
Or is Diddy's case more unique?
I think, unfortunately, this kind of exploitation is more common than we'd like to admit.
Really?
It's not always as blatant or dramatic as the cases that are presented in the documentary.
Right.
But the power imbalances exist.
Yeah.
Young artists, especially those from marginalized communities, might not have the same access to legal counsel or the industry knowledge needed to negotiate fair contracts.
It seems like the documentary is really trying to spark a conversation about these systemic issues.
Absolutely.
To get us thinking about how the music industry could be more equitable and ethical.
It challenges us to consider our own role as consumers.
Mm-hmm.
We often focus on the music, the entertainment, the final product, without necessarily thinking about the people who created it, the sacrifices that they made, the potential hardships that they faced.
It's interesting to kind of compare Diddy's approach to building his empire with the way that the music industry operates today, with the rise of streaming platforms and independent artists.
Yeah.
Do you think that these power dynamics are shifting at all?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
The digital age has definitely disrupted the traditional music industry model.
Right.
Artists have more avenues to release their music independently, to connect directly with their fans, and to potentially retain more control over their careers.
Right.
But the allure of major labels and the promise of large-scale success remains strong.
Right.
And even in the digital space, there are these new power dynamics emerging with streaming platforms and tech companies wielding significant influence.
It seems like there's always going to be a struggle for control, for ownership, for a fair share of the profits. And in the midst of all that, you have these incredibly talented individuals, the artists who are pouring their hearts and souls into their music.
And that's what we can't lose sight of.
Yeah.
The human stories behind the music, the dreams, the aspirations, the struggles, the triumphs.
Right.
It's easy to get caught up in the controversy, the allegations, the financial aspects, but ultimately it's about the art itself and the people who create it.
So as this story continues to unfold, as Diddy navigates these allegations, continues to build his empire, what do you think is the most important thing for us as observers to keep in mind?
I think it's essential to approach this situation and any situation that involves allegations of exploitation with nuance and critical thinking. It's so easy to jump to conclusions to label someone as a hero or a villain.
Right.
But the truth is often much more complex.
Right.
We need to be willing to listen to multiple perspectives.
To examine the evidence, to acknowledge the potential for both good and bad in any individual's actions.
It's a reminder that even our idols, the people we admire and celebrate, are flawed human beings. And understanding their complexities, their strengths and weaknesses can actually lead to a deeper appreciation of their work and their impact on the world.
And ultimately, it's about having these difficult conversations, acknowledging the systemic issues that exist, and working towards a more just and equitable music industry for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Sean Diddy Combs, and the allegations surrounding his empire, I want to pose a question to you, our listener. Does knowing about these allegations change your perception of Diddy and his legacy at all?
It's a question that's been on my mind a lot since watching the documentary.
Yeah.
And I think it's one that each viewer has to wrestle with on their own. You know, there's no easy answer.
Diddy's contributions to music and culture are undeniable.
Right.
But can we separate the art from the artist, especially when the allegations involve potential harm to others?
It's a dilemma we often face when it comes to these public figures, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, we may admire their work, their talent, their impact on society. But what happens when we learn about their flaws, their mistakes, their potentially unethical behavior? Does it diminish their achievements? Does it invalidate their contributions?
I think it's important to remember that people are complex. We're all capable of great things and of making mistakes. And often those two things are intertwined. It doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does encourage us to approach these situations with nuance and compassion.
It's like we have to hold these two seemingly contradictory ideas in our minds at the same time. Acknowledging the good while also confronting the bad. And that can be really challenging.
It is.
It's so much easier to just, categorize people as heroes or villains. Put them in neat little boxes.
Absolutely.
But reality is very rarely that simple.
It's not.
And that's where the real learning happens, I think.
I think so, too.
When we're willing to embrace the complexity, wrestle with the uncomfortable truths, resist the urge to oversimplify.
I agree.
It's in those gray areas that we can truly grow and develop a more nuanced understanding of the world around us.
Absolutely.
One thing that really struck me about this whole situation is how Diddy's story is still unfolding. He's continuing to work. He's continuing to create. He's addressing these allegations in his own way. And it's all happening in the public eye. Under this constant scrutiny of social media and the 24-hour news cycle.
It's almost like a real-life drama playing out in real time. And it's a reminder that reputation and legacy, these are fluid things. They're constantly being shaped and reshaped by events, by perceptions, by the narratives that take hold.
And we as consumers of media and information, we play a role in that process.
We do.
The choices we make, what we watch, what we listen to, what we believe, all contribute to the shaping of those narratives.
Absolutely.
It's a responsibility that I think we should all take seriously.
I agree.
We have a responsibility to be critical thinkers, to question the information that we're given, to seek out multiple perspectives. And to form our own informed opinions.
It's not always easy, but it's essential. Especially in a world where information overload can easily lead to misinformation and biased perspectives.
So as we leave you with this thought-provoking story of Sean Diddy Combs' empire and the allegations that have cast a shadow over his legacy, we encourage you to continue exploring, keep asking questions, and to engage in these important conversations about the music industry, about power, about accountability, and about the complex nature of success.
The truth, as they say, is often elusive and multifaceted.
It really is.
But the pursuit of it is always worthwhile. And sometimes the most valuable lessons come from grappling with those uncomfortable questions, from embracing the gray areas, and from recognizing that even our idols are human, capable of both great things and significant flaws.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, it was my pleasure.
I think this has been a really fascinating conversation.
Absolutely.
And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep the conversation going.